welcome to another edition of Trader Talk from Cannes. Today we've got Scott from OpenX on today to talk about open exchange versus the closed exchange. We just had an impassioned debate there, panel. Some interesting topics came up. So Scott, before we jump into that, give us an overview of your role at OpenX.
Sure. So I run global demand for OpenX. My teams look after our relationships with the various RTB platforms that integrate with our supply, the various ad networks that partner with us from an SSP standpoint, and we also have teams that look after agencies and trading desk relationships.
Thank you, Scott. So we had a very good, interesting panel there about the open exchange versus the closed exchange. And we've seen over the last couple of years the sort of advent of PMPs amongst publishers. I mean, how do we get here? I mean, why are publishers now investing so much time and effort in PMPs?
I think it's because buyers are actually trying to carve out the access to different inventory, and they're expressing some concern and fear about what they don't understand in a lot of cases around the open exchanges. So they, in a lot of ways, want to make sure that they know who they're buying inventory from, and they feel that the PMP provides them a more direct access to the publisher. And quite frankly, I don't think that's necessarily required. I think the open exchanges are getting a lot better in some of the traffic quality and the controls and the visibility that comes through.
And you've made a big effort in that area over the last couple of months. I've seen a Pixelate report, and you've actually done a report with ExchangeWire about traffic quality. So what kind of efforts have you made around the open exchanges to kind of improve that?
Yeah, and we're incredibly proud with the work that John Murphy and his team have done from a traffic quality standpoint. Over the last few years, in fact, I think it was a couple of years ago, we took the big cut where we kicked out 40% of the inventory that was in our exchange to make sure that we were only letting in the highest quality traffic. And we've kept that rigor up over the years. We have a pretty large team that audits the traffic that we bring on. We've got a pretty robust internal technology that we use to automatically scan in real time, kind of assess the integrity of the traffic, and then we also use third-party systems like Integral Ad Science to validate the work that we're doing and to help our systems learn and grow.
And is that sort of increased sort of amount of demand going through your exchange then in the last couple of months? Are you seeing more and more people kind of trusting what you do now?
Yeah, I think there was a misperception of who OpenX was for a long time because our foundation was around an open source ad server. But we got rid of the open source ad server years ago, I think back in 2006
Well, it was the building blocks for most ad servers in the space. I remember using it myself back in the day.
That's true. But we've built out an enterprise-grade ad server now. We've got the demand fusion technology through our SSP, and I think buyers now are starting to recognize the investment we've made. I think there's more and more importance placed, as is evident with the advent of PMP. There's more and more evidence placed or importance placed on traffic quality and the overall rigor that's put into it. And I think more and more buyers have appreciated the effort we've put into that.
So let's go back to the open versus closed exchange models. I mean, when programmatic arrived in the scene maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a whole kind of democratization of buying in the space, more demand coming in. Like obviously display advertising was sort of concentrated among a few thousand advertisers, but the idea of like buying in real time and more demand is coming into the market. Do you think the sort of PMP sort of model is kind of negating the advantages of opening up yourself to this external demand?
I think it certainly restricts the opportunity for publishers in the sense that they may want to provide access to certain advertisers of certain first-party data that they have access to, but you don't have to use the PMP to provide that advertisers with that benefit. You can use preferred insights types of deals where you're still letting that preferential access and data compete in the open exchange with the rest of the demand that might be interested in that supply. So I think there's a time and a place for PMP, but I think largely advertisers are frustrated with the inefficiencies of the publisher by publisher implementation.
So is the integration themselves, it's a very, very arduous process in terms of negotiating deal and setting it up, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a real hindrance, you think, to the growth of PMPs, or is it sort of something we should be sort of moving away from?
I don't know if we should be, but I think it is a logical conclusion that we do move away from it at some point. I don't think it's in the next 2 years. I think it's going to continue to grow. I think what we see typically, not just within our own, but just industry-wide, is that only about half of the deals that are done, anybody would consider successful. There's rampant evidence of deals that have only 1% win rates, or 5% fill, and there's just people not communicating, and because it's so manual, it's sort of a harkening back to the old days of media buying.
Yes,
that's not very scalable, and
No.
it's not the democratized way, as you would
So
call
you
it.
think that's a more of aggressive process rather than a sort of progressive way of buying programmatic offers?
You might. I mean, there is a use case for PMPs today, but I think one of the challenges that we hear oftentimes, whether it's from sellers or buyers, is that their commitments to each other aren't expressed in the deal itself. You're just carving out competition. You're maybe just adding extra access to data, but there's not an inherent commitment to provide a certain type of inventory or to buy a certain amount of inventory. So I think one of the things we'll see as an evolution from PMP is the dollars start to bifurcate to programmatic guaranteed, and not in the automated guaranteed way, but in the way that you're still using programmatic RTB pipes, and there'll just be more commitments between buyer and seller around a certain volume of transaction.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting to talk. The conversation we had at the panel about half an hour ago, there was the talk about the ad server. It's still an important piece of it, and we talk about holistic yield management. Are you seeing as we progress, we're going to be moving more towards that holistic yield management, in the sense that we have direct demand, you have network demand, you have SSP demand, all competing for that impression? And is that the way we should be looking at this going forward?
Absolutely. I think we started seeing the trend happen a few years ago when we started fusing demand between the networks and the open exchange. That brought great value to publishers, and I think the next logical conclusion is to then incorporate the direct demand into that as well, for, like you said, for that holistic view of the inventory and how to kind of best monetize it through these variety of channels.
And the publisher obviously will benefit from that for increased yield, et cetera.
Absolutely.
In terms of sort of where you see PMPs going in the next couple of years, how do they evolve? How do we move out of this restrictive sort of closed ecosystem?
Well, I think one of the important evolutions will be platforms that help us transact, so that there's less of the manual copying and pasting of deal IDs between different platforms. So the development of
a standardization, effectively.
Perhaps. But even if it is fragmented across a few major SSPs, I think building the infrastructure to automate the transactions and the negotiations of these will remove a lot of the headaches that currently happen with some of the manual workflow and the copying and pasting and whatnot.
Okay. Scott, thanks very much for today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Enjoy the rest of Cannes.
Thanks, you too.
And that was Trader Talk TV from Cannes, and we'll see you next time.